This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. The CNN Center right now is just beginning to work on this story, obviously calling our sources and trying to figure out exactly what happened, but clearly something relatively devastating happening this morning there.
American 11, are you trying to call?
The cockpit is not answering their phone. Our number 1 has been staffed, and our 5 has been staffed.
Hey, can you look out your window right now?
Yeah.
Can you see a guy at about 4,000 feet, about 5 east of the airport right now? Looks like he's...
Yeah, I see him.
You see a guy, look, is he descending for the building also?
He's descending really quick, too, yeah.
Well, that's
2,500 feet now. He just dropped 800 feet in like one sweep.
That's another situation. What kind of airplane is that? Can you guys tell?
I don't know. I'll read it out in a minute. Another one just hit the building.
Wow. Wow. Another one hit it hard. Another one just hit the World Trade.
The whole building just came apart.
Holy smokes.
Looks like 6, 7 floors were taken out. And there's more explosions right now. Hold on, people are running.
Hold on just a moment. We've got an explosion inside.
The building's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
Okay.
Hold on, I'll tell you what's going on.
Okay, just put Winston on pause there for just a moment.
Okay, the whole building just exploded some more. The whole top part.
Okay.
The building's still intact. People are running up the streets.
For those days, you know, MSNBC has just flashed on my screen. It looks like there is a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
We got Warner on the phone, who's looking at it right now.
Warner,
hi man.
What's the deal?
Something hit the World Trade Center. I think it was a plane. I heard it right over my head.
Now, one of our producers said perhaps a second plane was involved, and let's not even speculate to that point, but at least put it out there that perhaps that may have happened.
Well, the other tower just blew up. I mean, a huge hole just blew up in the other tower, the tower that the plane flew in. There's a huge hole in that.
I just heard something on the television. I was looking. I was saying, gosh, it looks like. I thought, oh, this is terrible. I thought I saw people falling from the building. And I said, well, that can't be. It must be debris. But I think I just heard in the background on the MSNBC, he did say there were people.
Jules, this is Ryan. Listen, on an airplane that's been hijacked, and things don't go well. I'm going to do this. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. So happy you're fine. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you, and I'll see you later.
The South Tower of the World Trade Center, unbelievably, has now collapsed.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, babe. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
They're all heroes in my eyes. They really are. They all pitched together, and they did what they thought was the best thing to do at that time. And I feel that Todd played a great role in that, because when he told the guys, "Are you ready?" I assumed that they were waiting on his cue. Then they responded to him, and he said, "Okay, let's roll."
Well, I don't really know how to start off. It's 20 years since 9/11 happened. It's hard to believe. First of all, it's hard to believe it's been that long. And I'm sitting here this evening with my father-in-law, Jeff, and my brother, John. And we just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about it and what we remember. Obviously how it impacted us, because it impacted everybody in a very bad way. But first of all, I just can't believe that's been 20 years ago. I mean, I remember that very, very clearly. You know, I was in first grade. Mom was homeschooling us. And I remember Pap called Mom and he said, I remember when Mom got off the phone, I remember her hollering for Dad. His dad was outside. And I overheard them saying something like, the country was under attack. And at that time, you know, I was a little kid, and I remember asking them, I was like, so what's going on? And they said, well, these guys flew these planes into this building. And when you're a kid, you don't understand how combustible jet fuel is and all like that. I always thought to blow something up there had to be a bomb. And I said, well, what'd they do? I mean, did they drop bombs on it? What'd they do? Because even then it didn't set clear with me that people would commit suicide to do something like that neither. You know, and so I remember that. And that's actually when I started following politics, because I started listening to the radio, and I would have been, I think, 8 years old at that time. I remember just sitting and listening to the radio sometimes for hours, listening to the coverage of it, and you know, and it just kind of stuck with me ever since.
Now, I was right at almost ready to turn 6, but I don't remember the day. I don't remember, you know, things happening. The only thing I remember about it is Dad had stacks and stacks of newspapers that he had just collected for months after the attack during the cleanup and all that stuff. But as far as remembering it actually happening, I don't remember it. And I should at that age, but I don't.
You know, and there's a specific radio clip that I can still remember from as a kid, because whatever news station I was listening to, they would play this clip over and over again. I just remember this guy screaming. I don't know if he was a radio correspondent or what that had been live on the scene, but I just remember him screaming, "Oh my God, the second tower just fell."
Exactly.
Or something like that. You know, just total panic. And that's stuck with me. I can still hear that guy's voice. But Dad, what about you? Where was
It was on the western coast. I don't exactly know the hour. I know there's a time difference. My pastor called me and actually got me out of bed at the time. So it probably was whatever the time frame might have been, 3-hour difference from 8:46 eastern northeast.
If you were on the west coast,
the west coast,
that's 4 hours, I think,
4 hour
right?
difference.
So it would have been pretty early.
So back
there.
up 6:30 or so. Anyway, whatever it was, could have been 5:30. But he said, "Hey Jeffrey, we'd just been attacked," and I was groggy in my sleep. He said, "Well," I said, "What?" He said, "The trade center had been, you know, has been attacked. There'd been 2 aircraft, and another aircraft, of course, had gone down into the Pentagon." I was just kind of overwhelmed with just that information, trying to get my head around what had just taken place, knowing that this was going to change the world.
Yeah.
It's a World Trade Center.
Yep.
And people from coast to coast around the world were just, you know, brought to their knees on this diabolical terrorist endeavor. You had to think about, you know, the agenda behind that enemy attack, and reading scripture, and of course weaving some things into that, but even just seeing this, in my opinion, a satanic attack was so devastating that the church was even uncertain as to what was going to take next. I mean, it was almost like, well, the rapture's next. We're gonna, you know, what's ever going to happen?
Yeah, people were terrified.
We were shocked.
Yep.
And Pastor, he just kind of like, well, what do we do now? And of course, one man said, "Let the church be the church," and then just reach out. So there was, you know, prayer vigilantes going up, almost, you know, whether they were set up on the sidewalk, that came later, but it was just unmoving. I don't know how to. I'd listen to it and listen to it and listen to it, and even saw some clips on what was going on, but never really did it resonate, just the impact of what was happening.
Yeah.
And still, I've never forgotten it.
Yeah. I don't think any of us ever will. You know, that was a moment like no other. I mean, of course, couple generations before us, you know, they had Pearl Harbor. I think that was our Pearl Harbor moment was 9/11, you know. It's still to this day, and you know, I didn't have anybody that I knew or that I was related to that passed away during all that, but still yet, just the impact it had on us as a culture and as a nation. There's times I'll hear, because usually around this time, all the TV stations and a lot of the talk shows I listen to, they do special Their whole program's basically dedicated to 9/11. And to hear those clips and see that footage and stuff, to this day, 20 years later, I still get misty-eyed during. And like I said, I had nobody with deep connections. I didn't have any personal connection there.
But they were your people.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
That was still our people that was happening to.
Yeah, it was your fellow countrymen.
Yeah, yes, it was.
And that it cuts deep.
I think in the mindset too of just in humanity, it was a drawing time of unifying our efforts to try to be a one, just in the name of humanity.
Yeah,
people really reached out. Could we go deeper with that? I think that we could, and I wish it would have been even a longer lasting or unifying draw.
Yep.
But it awakened people. I mean, death is imminent, and it's going to be on us. But when it comes that close, and people, I knew people in churches in that area that had actually people that were in the tower come down and even testifying today. I'm not at a place to give names, but to this day, they look at that place as just a sacred ground for the loss of so many lives.
Oh, yeah.
And I was in the area close near at one time, several years following the episode, should have taken the time to have gotten closer to ground zero when some people were actually a little bit withdrawn. They had already been there. They was like, we want to go back to remember because it's so embellished. It's so indelible on their minds that it breaks their heart.
Yeah.
And today it's still there.
John, you remember Dad was talking about the spirit of community that came out of that. Do you remember when we were riding the church van?
Yes, I do.
And we just going all through Clarksburg
and this was just in Clarksburg too.
Just in Clarksburg, and we started counting American flags. And how many did we see just in Clarksburg?
I honestly don't remember the numbers. Hundreds.
Yeah.
Hundreds of flags.
Just in that one little section.
I had that written down here because
you're getting a call.
Number's been calling me all day. I actually had it written down here because I had seen this a couple years back. A guy had written an entire article on Facebook about how he wanted the 9/12 America back.
Mm-hmm.
He said that you couldn't find an American flag for sale anywhere. They were just sold out everywhere. The amount of support that come out for first responders and the military was just, phenomenal. And it was an excellent article. I don't remember the guy that wrote it, but just going on and on about the amount of patriotism.
Oh yeah.
That emerged from that, and I do remember seeing all the flags and stuff afterwards. It was
something else.
It was something to see, that's for sure. I
remember also sometime after that, because it wasn't too long after 9/11 that we invaded Iraq, and it was like a constant state of war then, from the time I was 8 or 9 years old until basically now. And I remember as a kid asking my mom, this is several months, maybe even a year or more after 9/11, I remember asking her, I said, when's it going to go back to normal? And I remember she's like, it's never going to go back to normal.
It's not.
Something like this, you don't go back to normal from that.
No.
I've got a clip. Maybe we'll just play a little bit of it here.
So, before you play that, let me give just a little bit of backstory. So, the first radio transmission you'll hear was from Battalion Chief 1, who was actually, he was at the corner of Church and Lispenard Streets. I hope I pronounced that second street right. And actually witnessed the first tower, or the first plane strike the tower. And
so was he just there like on happenstance, or?
Yes. Yeah. There was really no rhyme or reason. It was just
there.
It was just where he was at. and he saw the first plane strike the tower, and he immediately called in the alarm.
And this is who we're about to hear.
Yeah, the first radio transmission will be from that battalion.
And what was his name?
I don't have it in the.
Looks like I do have. Says Chief Pfeiffer. Does that sound right?
Okay.
Battalion 1.
I'm reading this off NewYorkCity.gov, and this is the entire transcript of the fire operations response for 9/11, and it didn't include any names.
Okay. So we'll play this here. This was the first transmission on the radio after it happened. Of course, first plane struck at 8:46 a.m. and then this hit the airwaves.
Battalion 1.
We just had a plane crash into Alpha 4 of the World Trade Center, transmit a second alarm, and start relocating companies into the area.
10-4, Battalion 1.
Battalion 1 is also sending the whole consignment on this box to that area, okay?
Engine 6 to Mass, Engine 6.
The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building, it was just a huge explosion.
10-4, all companies stand by at this time.
So was that the first one, or because I know he raised that to a.
Immediately he called it a second alarm, which and you heard him talking about the box, and in large scale areas they have what they call box alarms, and they have almost a grid pattern that is set up in a certain area, and they have box numbers for each one of these squares in this grid, and in each box there are certain units assigned to respond to that box alarm. So if it's a structure fire or a car wreck or whatever type of incident comes out, when they transmit the box alarm, the first alarm companies are preset to respond. And then with each alarm that you move up, if you go to second alarm, that will increase, and depending on the agencies, some will, with a second alarm, they'll have more ladder companies come in. Some may have extra rescue companies. It's personal preference based on those agencies. But as you, like, a second alarm will bring in more units, and then they actually went all the way up to a fifth alarm, which, unless I am mistaken, was the highest alarm they had at that time. So immediately, Battalion Chief 1 called a second alarm, because just, seeing a plane strike the tower where he knew there was thousands working, he immediately called a second alarm because he knew right off the bat how bad it was going to be. And I don't know, we might be able to hear it in this clip, but while he is responding to the World Trade Center, before he even arrives on scene, he transmits a third alarm before he even arrives on scene.
I've got a couple more clips here, and I've not listened to these yet, but from the notes I have here, this is a Battalion 1 chief notifies dispatch that the plane appeared to be aiming for the tower.
Battalion 1 to Manhattan.
Battalion 1, check.
We have a number of floors on fire. It looked like the plane was aiming towards the building. Transmit a third alarm. We'll have the staging area at Vesey and West Street. Have the third alarm assignment go into that area. Second alarm assignment report to the building, okay?
All right, 10-4. Second alarm assignment, report to the World Trade Center. Second alarm assignment, report to 1 World Trade Center.
This next one looks like it's Squad 18 is requesting to alert that possible terrorism event.
Squad 1-8 to Manhattan, Jed.
Squad 1-8.
If the 1st Battalion transmitted that it looked like it was intentional, inform all units going into the box. It could be a terrorist act.
10-4, all units be advised.
All right, line of check to Manhattan.
Okay.
The next one that we'll play is dispatch is being notified that people are starting to jump from World Trade Center.
Unbelievable.
Be advised you have jumpers, guys. Jumpers.
All right, Division 1, be advised, Battalion 2 advised you have jumpers from the World Trade Center, okay?
Division 1 in Manhattan, did they already... Green 1 to Manhattan, okay?
Division 1, go with your message, okay?
That's jumpers, did it already jump?
Battalion 2, has those jumpers jumped, okay? Battalion 2, do you have jumpers down? Division 1, Battalion 2 is advising jumpers down, okay?
So even now, you know, when you guys hear that, I know for me, when I hear that, it still goes through me like a knife. You know,
because I personally have never listened to this. I've never listened to this full.
Yeah, this is the first time I've listened to this as well.
And basically, this is unedited because, like I said, from reading off of that transcript, the Battalion 1 immediately called in the alarm, and within 4 minutes, the first alarm companies were on scene. So this is, you know, basically real time of, you know, I mean, this radio communication just, I mean, these guys were dedicated, you know. And and I made the comment there earlier that, you know, unfortunately it couldn't have happened in you know, a more prepared city.
Yeah.
And I mean, that sounds bad, but, you know, they had the best, you know, up there, and a lot of the best gave their lives.
They had their stuff together.
And I mean, and for them, you know, to recognize before they was even on scene that this was a terrorist act.
Yeah.
I mean, to recognize that immediately, you know, I mean, these guys were thinking, right?
Oh, yeah.
This was another Pearl Harbor. This was something that, this was 20 years ago. I wonder how many youth today in America, you know, how much this is going to resonate on their, you know, if they're schooled and they do homework and it's handed down, they'll never forget it. They'll see it as it is and remember it. I didn't live in the Pearl Harbor era. I don't know, but I do recall the impact that it had on my parents.
Oh, yeah.
And it just kind of was handed down to my generation as to, you know, the life-changing effect.
Oh, yeah.
And this was a called out assault on our homeland.
Yes, it was.
We are in war. And the powers to be at the time, of course, President Bush acknowledged that and said, this is going to change the rest of the world. This act is going to be an act of war on terror. Granted, it's not going to be snuffed out. We cannot, you know, you cannot totally eradicate evil in the world unless you, of course, have, you know, God doing the work. But we as men, we do all that we can.
Right.
And I stood behind Bush when he made this call. It seemed to bring America to the making of, you know, we're going to do this or die.
Yeah.
And they were willing to take it to that full, you know, that full event. I don't know. When I saw it, you know, I'd just gotten back into the country myself, had been out of the country for a number of years, coming back into the country. And when you see something of this scale, it's a bolt of reality. This is not fiction. This is not made up. This is attack on our own flesh and blood, on our own land. I don't know. I have two boys now that are, you know, or one now, but both of them were in the Navy, and now one's still in, the other's still out. But these boys are patriotic.
Oh, yeah.
And my hat's off to these men that are willing to.
You know, hitting on that too, right after this happened, the recruiting centers we're just flooded.
Oh my.
We're absolutely flooded with men, well, boys even, you know. I mean, at 18, you're still a boy.
That's
you know, that were willing to lay down their life to retaliate, you know, and not just let it go unpunished.
Hello.
Hey, Miranda.
Yeah, is this thing on?
Yeah. You're on with, I've got John and my father-in-law, Jeff.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Evan, where was you when it all went down?
Well, I was actually a freshman at Glenville State College, telling my age a little bit. Freshman year, first semester, scared kid out in the what I would call big city compared to where I grew up.
Oh, yeah.
And I came into the dining hall there for breakfast, and everybody was running around and squalling, and people were crying. And I said, "What's going on?" And some kid runs past me and says, "We're at war." It's like, what's going on? And they told me that the planes had hit the tower, and it was just pandemonium. They were saying gas was going to go up to $5 or $6 a gallon, and you know, didn't know where they was going to attack next, and it just scared me to death. I run to the payphone because, you know, back then only the rich kids had the cellular phones.
Of course. Yep.
Called mom and dad and was crying and begging for them to take me home, come get me, take me home. I would have gone home. I didn't want to be stuck in Glenville when the world was coming to an end. But I tell you what, those several boys that I went to college with enlisted right after that, and I don't really know what happened to them. I mean, I never heard anything else about them. Weren't good friends, but acquaintances. And I tell you, it was a really eye-opening event for sure.
Yes, it was, and we were just talking about that whole the spike in enlistment and the patriotism that was everywhere. You know, it was the country really came together. You got this sense of, I think we all realized that we were part of something bigger, that maybe we didn't realize that before, you know, somebody basically punched us in the mouth, you know, but then it kind of brought all this out in us.
Absolutely. I hated that happened. You know, I grieve for still to this day for the people that lost loved ones, went through that tragedy. But I miss the America of 2001, 9/11. Really do. Because, I mean, nowadays, if you're a patriot, you're a minority.
Yes.
And it's a scary world to be in right now.
You are absolutely correct. Now, what effect do you see, any kind of effect that this had on you in your, you know, in your career path and just your life in general, you know, in maybe your political leanings or how you know, your sense of patriotism? Do you still see ramifications of it?
Well, I think it definitely strengthened my sense of patriotism, but as far as career paths, no, it didn't affect me there. I actually didn't get into EMS till I was older, probably in my late 20s. I actually was in college for force technology and graduated that and realized I hated it. So I just did little odd jobs until I got a job surveying at a coal mine. And then that lasted about a year, thanks to Obama. And I got laid off and started EMT class the very next night and haven't looked back. And that's been over 10 years ago.
That's very good. Very good. Yep. Now, we were just talking about how, like me personally, I didn't have any acquaintances that were in the towers. I had no direct personal connection to it, but it did something to me that to this day, and like I said, I didn't know anybody that was in there, but to this day, when I see the news coverage and see all the old reports and hear all the old, we were just going through some of the dispatch audio from New York, it still goes through me like a hot knife. Yeah.
And to be doing what I do now and to think about putting myself in the position that those first responders were in, just, I mean, it gives me chill bumps. Just to think of what would be going through my mind if I was dispatched to something like that around here even.
Well, we was just listening to these dispatches, and Battalion Chief 1, who, to be in that position, has had quite a few years of experience, and he was breathing like he had just run a mile.
Mm-hmm.
He was breathing so hard, just driving to the scene. You could tell he was scared to death, but he was still in that mode. He was still in that firefighter mode, and he was, taking command. He knew, immediately transmitted the second alarm, and 2 minutes later transmitted a third alarm. He was on the stick, and I couldn't. We had that big church fire where 5 firemen come within less than a second of getting killed when the roof collapsed.
Wow.
And just the amount of chaos that was on that scene.
Right.
I couldn't imagine, just, of course, you didn't have to turn a corner to see what was going on because the buildings were so high and the column of smoke, but, just getting your first look at the towers and seeing what you have, I could not imagine. I could not imagine what those guys felt.
This event was so gut-wrenching. To see the towers come down, to see the impact of the aircraft making its impact, but the thing to see people literally evacuating the building hand in hand, jumping out, was something so impacted my thinking. I'll never forget it. And going from place to place in the work that I was doing and going state to state in airports, there were banners across the security, 35, 40 feet long and 3 feet wide and in large black letters. And the impact of people the message across that was, don't even joke about it. And that was all that was said.
Yeah.
People had taken it so serious. And there were some that, I'm a shoe bomber or whatever the case might be, or I got, whatever the case. But they took this to heart. This was something that was never to be joked on, and it's something never to be taken lightly. And to see those people literally jumping to their death, knowing how do we go out of this world?
Right.
Do we burn up in this incinerator? Do we pray for a miracle on our way down that somehow God's going to send angels to draw us out of this mess? I mean, what goes on in the mind of those kind of people made an impression on me.
Well, I tell you, hearing that, I believe it was Battalion Chief 4, hearing him calling and in that panic, saying that he had jumpers down.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I mean, just
the sound of them at the floor level where they had set up command, and they caught, it was video footage, but you could hear just this random
breaking through the
sound.
Yep.
And they didn't know for the longest time, but that was actually jumpers hitting the ground.
Oh boy.
I watched that video as well, and now that I think about it, it probably was Battalion Chief 1 that I seen in this video, because he had the scene command set up in the lobby at the first tower that was struck, and they was just videoing him trying to get this stuff going, and him and a bunch of other battalion chiefs are trying to get this scene command set up, and just trying to figure out what to do next. And it honestly would sound like a 12-gauge shotgun.
There was actually agencies from all over the country that went there afterward to help. And my paramedic instructor, Paula Johnson, she actually went to the tower sites after it, and she still to this day has health problems from it, just from breathing in, all the nasty stuff that was floating in the air, and just, not only psychological effects of that still last to this day, but even the physical effects.
Yeah, these long-lasting
of the
things.
Survivors and the first responders. And
Miranda, you were talking about, how it really kind of stoked your patriotism. What do you think now, in hindsight, looking back at the 20-year mark? do you think we still have a proper grasp of what it was? Do people remember it enough? Do we put enough emphasis on it?
No, I don't. I don't think people are remembering it enough. There are a few that still give it the respect and the remember it the way that it should be. But most people these days, it's just something that they may have talked about in class or seen a clip of it on the internet, and it didn't really affect them in any way. And if something, God forbid, anything like that would happen today, I just don't know what kind of a response we would get.
Really?
I would like to think that it would unite the country again like it did, but I hate for anything like that to have to happen to do that.
Right.
You know,
even the unity was so short-lived. You know, I mean, it did. It drew us. We were there. I mean, and the prayer vigils, the people that were, the churches that were trying to make some kind of humanitarian effort to help accommodate, you know, any kind of physical, emotional, or any need that they could possibly do was overwhelming. But it was just short-lived. It didn't, and life goes on, and people try to find some kind of normalcy. Just the humanitarian respect of just individual Americans. That, to me, was what we as Americans are made of. We didn't care, you know, color, race, creed, whatever the case, you know, religion, whatever the case. I mean, like, we are together in this thing.
Yep.
Let's don't let this thing, you know, dictate or misdirect our focus as to one another. Now, granted, Americans are, I mean, why is everybody wanting to come over here? So that they could feel what we feel as being true blue American.
What we have. Yep.
But the impact, are we willing to lay our life on the line as these firemen, these people? Oh, it just wants me to, I cry. I think they gave all. Some gave, you know, many gave some, but there were some gave it all. And it'll never change.
You know, speaking to the courage and to the thought for others that these firemen had, the first man that was confirmed to have died at 9/11 was the chaplain for the FDNY, and his name slips my mind, but some of the guys had, you know, done interviews afterwards, and they said they would see him off kind of pacing, looking up at the structure, holding his helmet over his heart. And they said that he always did that when he was praying. And he said they knew he was praying and nobody was disturbing him. He was just, you know, pacing, looking at the towers, just, you know, just pouring his heart out, praying for people. And right as Tower 2 was starting to come down, he was in the lobby with, there was around 30 other firefighters with him. When the tower started to collapse, everybody, including him, began running up the stairs.
Think of that.
And they didn't make it past the first flight of steps when the tower completely collapsed. And he was killed instantly, but none of those almost 30 firemen with him were even injured.
Wow.
He was killed, but everybody else walked out of that structure.
Something.
Wow.
And they were on, you know, the first floor of that tower when it come down.
Miranda, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I thank you for joining us on this here today. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
No, I just appreciate y'all including me on this.
Sure.
It's been an honor, and I hope I added a little bit more to your segment.
Absolutely.
I hate to just dwell on all the negativity that surrounded 9/11. I know it was a horrendous act of terrorism to our country, but think about at least the short-lived patriotism and love of the country that it did provide. And it just showed us the best of what mankind had to offer.
Amen.
And I just hope that it doesn't take another horrendous act of terrorism to bring that back out in our country. I think we all need to think about what we truly believe in and just keep the country and the government in prayer.
Good.
Absolutely.
Because I really think that's what it's going to take to turn it around.
These numbers may not be exactly accurate, but I went through and I broke down all the the casualties from the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and on the aircraft. So at the World Trade Center, Fire Department of New York lost 343 firefighters. The New York Police Department lost 23 officers. The Port Authority Police lost 37 officers. There were 8 EMTs and paramedics from private EMS agencies that were killed. There was 1 New York Fire Department fire marshal that was killed. 1 member from the New York Fire Patrol, 1 member from the FBI, 1 Secret Service agent, and the Secret Service bomb dog named Sirius was also killed during the initial strike. In the North Tower alone, there was 1,402 civilians that were confirmed killed. In the South Tower, there were 614 civilians that were confirmed killed, with 24 remains still missing. The World Trade Center Hotel, they could not estimate the number of casualties sustained due to the amount of people that were sheltering in place at the hotel. It's estimated around 200 civilians jumped from the towers. That includes both the North and the South Tower. At the Pentagon, there were 70 civilians that perished. There were 69 members of the U.S. Army that were killed, 9 military contractors, and 39 enlisted men from the Navy. And then American Airlines Flight 11 that struck the North Tower. There were 83 civilians killed and 11 crew members that were killed. United Airlines Flight 175 that struck the South Tower. 55 civilians and 9 crew members were killed. American Airlines Flight 77 struck the Pentagon. 59 civilians and 6 crew members were killed. United Airlines Flight 93 that crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. 40 civilians and 7 crew members were killed. The total number of deaths at the World Trade Center is a little bit more than 2,655. There was 187 lost at the Pentagon, and on the aircraft alone there were 250. So at the best of my numbers that I've got here, a total of 3,073 American lives were lost. And I did not include in any of those numbers the 19 terrorists that committed these acts, because I did not want to include them with our fellow Americans.
That's right.
Very good. May we never forget, and may we never forget who did it.
That's right.
Absolutely right.
You know, like any major disaster or catastrophe, you know, we are prone to try to put things under the rug or wash them from our memory. But the healing is remembering. And as much as it hurts, you'll get through it. And it could be the loss of an individual or a financial crisis or a cancer that could destroy, you know, your comfort and your stability and where you were trying to head, and all of a sudden it's gone. And you think of a flash flood, you think of an earthquake, you think of hurricanes, I mean, things, you know, whatever the case might be, and we hear stories of people literally losing everything. But their way of surviving is, though they'll get through it, they will never forget it. And that seemed to structure in the right sense. Now, granted, there's always exceptions, but I believe it just to be part of the fabric to help make you a better individual, causing us to not forget. We will not forget. And it hurts. It really does, because you can personalize it with anything you have in your life. Your tower in life in general, lots of things are going to come down. Our hope and our fixed, anchor seemingly to our soul is like, well, here is a World Trade Center. This isn't just America. This is world involved individuals on our homeland. Lives were changed, and we almost want to say, to just preserve any kind of sanity, well, let's just forget it. But really, the healing process is to remember it and to structure your priorities and realize what makes a difference in our personal life, in our family living, in our spiritual being. Well, where are we headed? What are we going to do with this? How is it going to make me a better individual? And I think that, in a lot of people's mind, it's, they think the destruction is something that's just going to destroy us altogether. I don't believe that that's really what I believe is God's intention. Some things do need to be erased. I lost family members dear to me, and you have too. But to almost resonate some kind of wind in our sail to say we're gonna put our boots on, and we're going to, crying and painfully battle against this evil that we didn't even expect or see coming. And it's like, how dare you attack me on my homeland? I mean, I don't know. And individuals have to find that something within themselves. That's something that will foster courage enough to say, I remember what was taking place. And this is not going to make me bitter. This is going to make me a better individual.